9 days. She spent 9 years in jail before she escaped from an adult prison. One report says she escaped with one other boy, and another one says it was two boys. But she was soon caught after, and then she served another 2 years before she was released in 1980. At the age of 23, she was free to start a new life. And I understand that she was a juvenile when this occurred, but look at Bustamante. She was too. You have, and I know it's different states have different rules and different laws and different reasons that people are released, but this you typically see in your male offenders, if they're caught and they have this criminal background, if they're caught for multiple things and they spend time in jail, even if they weren't supposed to be released, when they are released for good behavior or overcrowding or whatever the reason is, they release a violent offender, they typically go out and they murder again. And so that's, I shouldn't call it a pet peeve, but it is. It's a pet peeve of mine. Many of these things that we talk about would have never happened had that person been kept in prison where they should have been to begin with. Why do we even have trials and sentence somebody to something if they're not going to stick to the sentence? It's ridiculous. I mean, I feel like it's a waste of money. And I almost feel like if you have a family, I do feel this way. It's not almost, I do. If you have a family member or a friend who is killed by a perpetrator who was released from prison early or released because of overcrowding and they should have never been released, they had an original like life sentence or 30-year or 40-year sentence, and they're released, I feel like you should be able to sue the justice system. That might not be a popular attitude or opinion, but I just feel like we have failed society so badly. We have all of these things in place for us to have a civilized society. And then we have these systems that just go completely against that, their own rules, and release people. And then other people are killed. It's just mind-boggling to me that happens. It makes me angry, actually. It makes me really angry when I read about these cases and I find that these people are released. You rarely ever have anyone rehabilitated to the point where they're not going to get back out into society and kill someone. If it's in their genes, it's in their genes. Unless the exceptions to that might be someone who killed, not as a serial killer, but someone who killed, maybe they were being abused and they killed their abuser. They're not someone who's going to go out and look for someone else to kill. They didn't enjoy the killing. It wasn't something they wanted to do. They were forced to do it for self-preservation. Those type of things are different. I'm not classifying those in this. I'm talking about serial killers and extremely violent offenders. They should never be back out. Period. There's such a huge argument. I mean, we could talk about it for days. There's so many things that go along with that. And if that interests you, just look up some stuff about it. You can Google it. You can ask Siri to come up with something and she'll, there's just so many things to it that are very frustrating. And maybe one of the reasons why I'm so interested in these things is trying to figure out how in the world this person got back out. How were they able to manipulate the system in that way? How were they able to convince someone that they were rehabilitated? I don't know. But that being said, Mary Bell was released, and at the age of 23, she started a new life. She became pregnant a few years later and gave birth to a child on May 25th of 84. Now, she was supposed to be in protective custody where they change her name and they give her a whole new life somewhere where no one knows who she is. She did not go back to her hometown of St. Martin's. She was somewhere else. But somehow the media found out where she lived and that she was pregnant and gave birth to a child. And the child was born, this is odd, the child was born on May 25th of 84, exactly 16 years after she murdered Martin Brown. And there was some upheaval where people who heard this thought maybe she shouldn't be allowed to keep the child given her violent history, but nothing came of that. She was able to keep and raise the child, but she actually went to court when she found out that it was law officials who had leaked her residence and her new identity along with her daughter. When her daughter started becoming aware of what her mother was, Bell went to court in 2003 and was granted a court order protecting the lifelong anonymity of herself and her daughter. And then the protection also extended to her granddaughter, who she has a granddaughter in her Belle is in her 60s and she has a granddaughter. So it includes her daughter, and her granddaughter. In her granddaughter, of course, they say avoids any publicity. But think about it. That was released. People know about it. And to our knowledge, she didn't commit any more murders or any other criminal acts after getting out. Was she rehabilitated? Maybe. Maybe it was a deterrent that she didn't want to go back into prison, especially because she had children. But this is actually anybody who goes to court seeking a new identity or like extending that to include other family members. It's actually called the Mary Bell Act. So you can go to court and request that, and basically you're just asking them to include your family members in that anonymity so that you can live a peaceful life, so that they can live a peaceful life. And you can read a lot about these families now who have come forward, and they talk about living with a serial killer, BTK's daughter. We talked about that not too long ago, where she's actually actively helping the police, investigators, FBI, helping them to try and solve these murders, try to solve and see if her father was involved in any other ones. And, she's not doing it for money. She's not doing it for publicity. She's not actually, proud of any of it. But she, there's several interviews with her that are really interesting. She's a very strong person. And what's sad about it is, she shows pictures of her and her father. He walked her down the aisle when she got married. She loved her father. And he was, by all reports, a good father. And now, she was devastated, of course, to find out that her father was BTK, as was her brother and, her mother. Her mother was actually, if you recall, granted a divorce the day after he was captured and confessed. An emergency divorce, which was effective that same day. And the son is nowhere to be found. No one knows where he is. No one knows. He's just disappeared. He wanted no part of this. But his daughter, who had a particularly good relationship with her father, has taken it upon herself to help right some of the wrongs that her father did, which I think is so admirable. Putting herself out there like that, and wanting to make amends for her father, even though none of this was her fault. So, it's interesting that you have someone like Mary Bell, who's out living among society now, who has a daughter and a granddaughter. And, um, she was another big controversy. Of course, remember that this was in Great Britain. Bell was actually paid for her life story. Serent Gitta is the author, and it's called Cries Unheard: Why Children Killed, the Story of Mary Bell. And people were really outraged that she was paid for that. Now, here in the United States, that can't happen. I don't know what the law is called, but if if there's a story written about a serial killer and the serial killer, helps with that story, they don't get paid for it. It goes to their victims' families. Um, and that's the way it should be. They should not prosper. And even in being in jail, having money in jail, you still are prospering because you have to have an account where you can buy things from their, I don't know what they call it, maybe commissary. But to get any extras in prison, snacks and things, you have to have an account. And that's why they set up, there's a whole system in prisons where you can work and you make maybe 25 cents a day, or you make 2 cents an hour, or whatever it is, and you work in the library, or you work in the cafeteria, and you earn money and it goes into this account. But it's very little money, right? I mean, it's very little money. And family members can put, I believe it's up to $100 or $99 in the account, but that's it. That's like the max that you can have in that account at any given time. So they can't benefit from that at all. They can't put that money in their account and be able to just willy-nilly go buy whatever they want. That doesn't work that way. If you are in prison and you don't have family or anybody that's supporting you, you have to make your own money to put in that account to buy the extras. If you read about prison systems and the way they're set up, things in the commissary actually become like money. They're used for bartering. Like they'll sell a pack of cigarettes. It's worth so much, and they'll sell a pack of cigarettes for this, or they'll give a pack of cigarettes to someone for protection. You can watch all kinds of stories. They're fictional stories on TV about that, but it's true that that's the environment that's in prison. And you have hierarchies. You have you have the prisoners who run the prison, who run that environment, and people do pay them for protection. They also pay them to take people out. Jeffrey Dahmer, his murderer was in prison. Jeffrey was working, mopping the floor in the cafeteria, and he was murdered with a knife, a man-made knife, or they think they call it a shiv or something. And things happen, and they happen to serial killers who target children and elderly mainly. You won't see violent offenders saying a whole lot about male violent offenders don't get upset about killing women. But they do have a code of honor among themselves that you don't kill children and you don't kill the elderly. And that can be your death sentence. You may have life in prison, but a lot of those people spend their life in solitary confinement for that reason, because they will be a victim in the general population. And unfortunately, it's callous of me to say it that way, but unfortunately, we have as a civilized population or country, we do have an expectation to keep people safe inside the prison walls, no matter what they've done. They do have a right to safety, even though when they were out in the world, their victims did not have that. Their right was taken away from them to be safe, right? But we feel like we have to keep them safe inside that prison. And so you have